You're on.
Okay. Hello. We're going to talk about this glider today. This is glider 191. This is the glider that's got the Vemco RX Live pit tag receiver here, the acoustic receiver. It's also got a CTD. It has a dissolved oxygen sensor, which is underneath. And before this is deployed, you have to remove this little rubber cap. And it has a 3-channel eco puck, which I'll have to pick this whole glider up to show you because it's under the belly.
Okay.
And then the final thing that it has is a PAR sensor, the little ping pong ball. And again, this is just a protective cap that we leave on while we're working on the glider in the lab. The glider can be handled by its tail fin. This is very solid. You can hold on to it here. Pretty much everything else is not meant to be having any rough handling to it. It can be picked up by its pick point, but just so you know, when it is picked up by the pick point, it is nose heavy, so it won't come up horizontally. It'll come up tail first.
Sure.
When it's deployed, it has wings, but we've taken the wings off because now we've got it on the bench. And when we're moving the glider around, we always have its little safety belt on. But now I'm going to start working on it, and I'll take the safety belt off. So before we get going, I just wanted to go through some of the tools that you guys will need. And one of the essential tools is this long-handled T Allen driver. I'll make sure to supply that with you. That's for taking apart the hull. There's also the same size Allen key, but this has a torque setting in it, 15 inch-pounds. Mm-hmm. And when we're sealing the glider up, it's important that you have the right torque setting on there because these are carbon fiber hulls and they expand and contract at depth, and you just need to make sure that it's not too tight. This is a smaller T-handled Allen key that's used for a bunch of small pieces. It's really convenient. I like to have a 1/2 inch open end wrench for undoing the air bladder. We'll see that later. We also have a small 3/32 Allen key. Okay. This is for undoing the prop. A set of regular old Allen keys with the ball head on them. I'll call out the names and the sizes when we're using them, but 7/64 is one that we use a lot for the taking apart. And then also we will need a green plug. The green plug is how you turn the glider on, and the red plug, which is right here, is how you turn the glider off. So before we start working on the glider, we're going to verify that the red plug is in. We don't want to start working on a live glider. And this is nice and convenient. You can pull this out, undo it. If we wanted to boot it up, we could put the green plug in, but we're going to work on it now, so we're going to leave it off. So I'll just have that and push it in. Basically, that is ready for deployment because now the prop can spin, and it's not going to hit the power plug.
Cool.
Okay, so the first things first is to remove. First things first is to confirm the glider's off. I'm going to work off my script here so you guys are on the same page. And then we're going to loosen up the bolt that
on the end of the prop there.
That connects the thruster, the prop. And that is just, it's a magnet that holds it on there. So you just have to pull that off. And then we'll use our short-handled T Allen driver. We'll take off the 2 bolts that hold on the tail cowling. They go on pretty easily. Set those aside, and then we're going to remove the tail cowling. We kind of have to spread it apart a little bit because it's a tight fit where this goes through.
Okay, you can pull the plastic
over the thruster. Yeah, it's pretty burly. Nothing you could damage on that. Now inside here, there's a bunch of wires. This stainless steel knob there, that's the ejection weight, and the ejection weight wire is right here that triggers a current that goes through there at 15 volts, and it will literally burn through a piece of wire in seawater so that if there were an issue, this would eject its 1 kilo weight and the whole thing would float to the surface. Okay. There's a couple of similar looking plugs, but the one that does not have a protective cap is the air plug. That is how we gain access to the insides of the glider. And this is the glider air bladder, When the glider comes to the surface, it wants to get the tail up, high up out of the water, so it can make communications with the iridium, and so it inflates. It uses the air that's in here, pumps it out, inflates the air bladder, and gets it nice and high up out of the water.
Cool.
Okay, so we've kind of got access to that. What I like to do before I get in there is to loosen up these wing rails just a little bit so that we don't have any pressure between the aft hull, the science bay hull, and the forward hull. Because if these are tight, it puts a little bit of pressure on there. So I'm going to loosen up the two on the port side and the two on the port side. That was starboard side. Cool, okay. Actually, I can even show you what they look like on the inside.
Yeah.
They have weights here and spaces for weights if we wanted to make it heavier, but right now it's perfectly ballasted for 1,022 kilograms per cubic meter.
Cool. So you shouldn't have to adjust that.
Shouldn't have to adjust anything, no. Undo this cable that goes up to the RX Live. Just a screw and pull that out so now we can separate these hulls.
Right.
And there shouldn't be anything binding. I also like to loosen up the two Allen screws that are up here. The right size, yep.
What is that one?
That is 1/8.
Cool.
Okay. That's a little tight. Okay. Because that can also bind on the hull up here. And we shouldn't need to get into this
at the moment
part of the hull to do the job that we're doing, but it kind of makes sense, I think, to just make sure that nothing's binding so that we don't do any damage to anything. Yeah. So a couple turns there, and just to make sure there's nothing too tight binding. Okay. So now that we've got things loosened up, I can use my large T-handle Allen. Actually, I could even show you with the 1/2 inch. This is the air plug. And you'll hear, as I do this, air is going to start hissing as it goes into
Yep.
So now we know that there was a vacuum because it's pulling air in.
And so you're going to have to let that out before you are able to separate the...
Exactly, because if you can't quite see it probably on the camera, but there is a Allen head screw right there, and that is called the tie rod. The tie rod it goes all the way through the aft section, the science bay, and it basically has a threaded end that screws into the forward bay here. So that keeps everything together. So you kind of have to line up the Allen T-handle tool with the, yep, it's right in now. And I'm gonna go lefty-loosey to start pulling it apart, right. And you can see right now, as I'm unthreading it, it's starting to separate here. And you can even use, oh, and I meant to introduce this other tool. It's called the cracker. Another T-handle to this one's kind of beat up and chewed on. But you use this in these little grooves to separate the different sections from one another. I want to make sure I have to get into this section here. So I'll use it there. And I need to get in the section here, and so I will use it here to separate this carbon fiber hull from the science bay. So now that I've got those separated, just cracked a little bit, I'll continue to do the unthreading of the tie rod. And I'm getting close. What I do is I typically kind of gently slide this one out so that I know that I've got it undone all the way. Oh, I've got a couple more threads that I have to do here. Yep, there, and now it's free.
Cool.
Okay. So in order to get access to the lithium rechargeable batteries, we've got to open this. I don't know which way to do this so you can see here, but these are the O-rings. One here, one here.
Right.
We'll also have one here, and then there's two up in the nose section.
Okay.
But we want to make sure we keep these really clean. I wear a hat. This is like if you were to get a hair from your head or an eyebrow hair or a beard hair laying across one of these O-rings, that would be a potential path for leaking. So we want to make sure that we do this in a clean, dry environment. Cool. Again, a nice warm environment is good because that way you won't have humidity building up inside here. So now we have a wiring kind of mess. It's like the octopus inside of there. Oops, I'm sort of gently tugging. And I think we're gonna go ahead and just take everything apart inside of here. And the reason why is because we're gonna need to get into, this is the science bay, and inside the science bay where this says must remove PAR before electronics, that's where the science bay compact flash card is that controls that stores all the data that the science bay is recorded. And we're also gonna take out the compact flash card that's in the aft tray here because the aft tray stores all the data that's used by the flight control computer inside the glider.
Okay.
So why don't we take a break from filming, and we'll come back and we'll start undoing all these connectors.
Sounds good.
Cool.
You're on.
Okay, cool. Well, we are at the glider is open stage, and we're going to continue to take things apart here. I've got the aft section open, but all the wires are still connected. And now what I want to do is gain access to the compartment between the forward bay and the science bay. And this requires a little bit of work on the cracker. You can see here, you kind of have to work this in between that little half shell groove and the groove by the forward bay. Oops, sorry.
No, you're good.
Sometimes you have to kind of come at it both sides.
Sure.
There's another
groove.
Another groove there that I will prop open. There we go. Oh, my crackers.
Bound up.
I made a little space up here so it can move forward.
Oh, okay.
You did remove this thing all the way, right? Yeah. And
So it's just that O-ring kind of holding pressure right now.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I think also my cracker is kind of half worn down.
Sure.
And it could really use a little TLC. Maybe a new cracker will be in the box for you guys. You should probably like.
There it is.
I'm gonna say we should stop the video and start again because this is looking too hard, but you know what? It's fine. You should see this. Okay, so now we have access to the wires up in the forward cavity. So this is our pitch battery here. We have 3 wires that come off of the pitch battery. Mm-hmm. This is black and red. This is power, main power, and these are sort of communication ports here. Sorry.
Maybe I'll go to the other side.
Sure, yeah. They have these Molex style connectors. This one you can't see, but this one's pretty obvious.
Sure.
where you have to press down on one side
Mm-hmm.
to undo the latch. And these are the same way. This black one here comes off. This white one down here comes off. And this white one there comes off. So these three all go to the forward section of the glider, and these three down here are the connectors that go to our battery bank. And this one is really tiny and takes a bit of care to get off.
Yeah, a little tiny clip there.
Yeah, a little tiny clip there. You just got to get your thumb on it.
Cool.
Okay.
So
Yep, this is the forward, what's called the pitch battery, battery harness, essentially. So these are the three connectors that go into the battery. This is just a ground wire. And then this 6-pin connector goes into the 6-pin connector in the science bay.
Sure.
So that feeds the electricity back to the aft bay. So now we've got that fully disconnected. It's ready to get hooked up for charging. And I can move back here to the aft bay. And this is a little bit, there's a few more wires back here in the aft bay. And I'm just gonna go through and try and show you guys each one. So this is a 3-pin connector, nice easy access. And then inside the bay, there is a 4-pin connector. And then this is like a 22-pin connector.
Okay.
And but those are connected together,
Mm-hmm.
and they're a little tricky to get off. You really have to
Sure.
get your fingers inside there. This is quite a bit easier to work on. This is this lower connector here. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Do you need some more light in there, you think?
I think it's okay.
Here's another black connector here. Again, this I'm just pushing down on this little plastic latch
Mm-hmm.
and gently pulling out. And then there's one more white connector there. Okay. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 connectors that have to be undone.
Great.
And now that we have all 6 of those connectors undone, we can remove the aft electronics assembly, and now you can see that tie rod end.
Right.
I don't think we need to go through in detail too many things here, but one thing that I should point out to you are that there are 2 wiring harnesses, and I'll put some better tape on here so that no one gets confused. But those wiring harnesses are not used,
I see.
the 2 here. So I'll try and maybe zip tie those. Those are for auxiliary sensors that we do not have installed on this glider today. But the compact flash card, it's labeled 191, glider serial number 191, MB for main bay. That is our flight, this is the flight control computer. We're gonna wanna take that out because we're gonna wanna back this up after the flight, because not all the data that this thing generates gets sent up via Iridium.
Cool.
And then I have this little wooden stand that I use to put the aft bay on because it is very expensive and very fragile, and we want to keep it clean. So we'll kind of leave it there like that so it doesn't fall over or get knocked while we're working on the rest of the glider.
Sounds good.
So carbon fiber hull, and now this is our lithium rechargeable battery pack. The lithium rechargeable battery pack is held in by 2 pins and this bracket. So I just kind of, the 2 pins are nice and clean, they're folded over, they're not impeding any of the cables, but I'll pull them up. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's one. And the other one, you kind of get on the other side here, pull that up.
Great.
And then I can slide this whole assembly without pinching any cables back into the bay there. And in order to get access to the Science Bay computer compact flash card, I have to undo these 2 Allen bolts.
Okay.
And they are, I think, 3/16. Okay, so that is the bracket that holds our aft battery back. Bracket bolts.
Okay.
And then, oh yeah, here we go. Get a better shot if you
Yeah,
need.
sure.
This is where the pins go through to hold the battery on right there.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, now there's this shield and the cables run through it, but the cables you kind of need to get lined up with that oval cutout. And you can just kind of gently work this off without nicking any cables. It doesn't need to come back too far, just enough so that I can gain access. Can you see that in there, Jordy? There's a little wire bail that holds the compact flash card on.
Okay.
I can flip that up, reach my fingers in, and pull that right out. And so that is 191 SB for Science Bay compact flash card.
Okay.
This is all the brains that control the Science Bay.
You want to flip that bail up again, or will it flip? Yeah.
I can't flip it down unless there's a card in there.
Okay. Okay.
But that's the bay. Okay, so let's take a break here and then I'll hook up the battery charger.
Sounds good.
All right.
You're on.
Okay, so now we've got our glider open. We've got our access to both of the battery packs. This is the charging unit. Right now I have it plugged in. And there's a power switch in the back. It is turned off right now. You could tell because it would have a red light right here if it were on.
Okay.
So the first battery that I'm going to hook up to the charger, this is set up so it can do two simultaneously, but we're only going to use one. And this is the power cord into the pitch forward battery pack, and this is the charge monitoring cable, basically.
Okay.
So, oops, get a little space here. Yeah, you want to come around that side. There is a 2-prong for positive and negative, and then this is a 6-pin connector for kind of the state of health, and that just clicked, and this is clicked. We want to double check those. That's set up.
Cool.
Okay, now for the aft battery, we have this jumper harness to accommodate this battery and our G2 glider, but with new gliders you don't need this, but we'll take this off, set this down, bring the other cable, charging cable up. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14-pin connector. Make sure the little divot is lined up with the connector, and then boom, connected.
Great.
So I can go over to my charger in the back, power switch, it's plugged in, and I will hit the power. You can see these batteries are almost fully charged. It'll probably run for 5-10 minutes or so, and then start dropping below 0.5. 0.5 and lower is fully charged.
Okay.
When these things are depleted, it'll probably wind up putting 20 amps into the battery bank, and it will take overnight 12, 14 hours to charge them up fully. And they do get warm, and there's fans on them, so you want to make sure you've got nice, good airflow.
Yep.
Right. And I would basically leave the system on like this overnight so that it could charge. And while that's happening, I'll be backing up my compact flash cards to a hard drive, and we can go through that sort of computer-related steps next.
Great. You're on.
You got me on the mic?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, well, we're going to assume that the batteries are fully charged, even though it says 0.8. Should be 0.5 or less,
okay.
But that's pretty dang close for demonstration purposes.
Right.
So I'm going to shut power down, and then I'm going to disconnect the charging cables here. I'll put in my little jumper harness. There. And then I'll put in, disconnect this one. Big power cable there. And then this tiny little guy here. Okay. All right, so now we've got our batteries would be hopefully fully charged, ready to rock and roll. I'm gonna pop these in.
Okay.
Because I can walk somebody through with other cards. We don't need to have that on videotape, but I'm gonna pop in my Science Bay compact flash card. Here, got grooves on the side that line up.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if we should do this with a flashlight or something.
Sure.
Just to make sure.
Actually, yeah. Is that bright enough, you reckon?
I think it will be.
Otherwise, I have this one too.
Yeah, this will do.
Or I have this one.
This is good. We got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to put my Science Bay compact flash card in. Make sure the grooves are lined up. And then make sure that this wire gate is closed so it holds it in. Just clicks into place just like that.
Great.
I think what I'm going to do next is tackle the forward bay wiring harness.
Okay.
And so we've got our 4-pin. That goes in the... Oh, I can't tell if that goes in the top or the bottom with the clip.
To the side, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Side,
Yep, so the clip goes on the side. Click, you hear that, and then we'll go tiny little 6-pin guy. Do we need this?
It's a little better on this side, but
Into the center of the battery. I can't see anything.
this is the little black one.
There we go. There we go. Click.
Okay, great.
And then our 2-pin Big Mama Jama power cable. Good. And then we're going to go, this is a 4-pin connector. It's only got one wire coming off of it, but that's okay. Click that in. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Now our wiring harness is together.
Okay.
And we'll go this 6-pin to this 6-pin on the faceplate on the forward side of the Science Bay. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-pin to 10-pin here. I have to push these together so that they're not stretching the cables.
Mm-hmm.
And then last but not least, make sure all these guys are fully seated and clipped, because if they're not fully seated, then that's a problem.
Great.
Now, here's our O-ring.
Yep.
We want to make sure this is nice and clean. I will supply spare O-rings if you need. And if you need to take them out, what you do is you press and slide your fingers up so that you can roll that thing out of its O-ring groove.
Great.
I'm going to leave this one in now because it's brand spanking new and it should be fine for our series of deployments in Prince William Sound. And when I was working on this thing with my little cracker, some plastic came out, so I want to make sure that that is super clean again before I close this thing up. And it looks pretty clean. So as I push the hull together, this is where the tie rod goes through and threads into here. I want to make sure that there's no cables that are in the way as I clean this, as I close it up. Can you see that pretty good?
Yeah. Can you point to that little?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
Receiver again.
The receiver is right here. That's where the threaded
Perfect
holes are. So closing this thing up, nice and smooth, nothing in the way. Okay, that looks good. And then on top here, you can see I have a little black Sharpie line, and we want this to be aligned with this divot in the hull. So I have to rotate just ever so slightly. And then keep it just like that. There we go. Nice. Slids in. Nice and... Okay, so now we'll go back here to the aft section of this science bay. We'll slide this faceplate over our little octopus of cables. Okay, we'll get out our, what did I say? It was 3/16 inch Allen key and our bracket that attaches the batteries. And this is a little tricky sometimes because you have to have that lined up just so, and then catch the threads. A couple there. And then I have to push the cables up a little bit to get that to seat properly. And then we'll catch the threads in there. Just tighten that down. Cool. Okay. So now what I like to do is slide the whole hull forward with the battery inside. And then you can see that the battery sort of tends to fall out of the hull. So I want it to be lined up pretty close before I put those pins in. I have to pick it up just ever so slightly so it rests on top. And then I can insert my pins to hold the aft battery back into its bracket there. Sorry, I'm trying to leave you space so you can see.
It's all good.
That one's in.
That was the first pin there.
I can slide my tray out so I have a little more working space. And then put the second pin in. There we go.
Great.
And now that's it. Good. So I'll go back to my aft electronics tray, put in my flight compact flash card into the harness, push that in all the way, close that up. Then I can put a hand on the bottom here.
Sure.
To pick that up and then lift it by the bracket in the back.
Yep.
And this is kind of the careful part because now I've got a couple wires that are dangling.
Mm-hmm.
And as I slide this through, I have made this mistake before where I catch a wire and shear it off and create all kinds of hassles for myself. So let's try not to do that today.
Trying to line that rod up.
Yeah, now you have to come through here and get this rod without impinging on any cables. Check to make sure everything's looking good in here. It's looking great. And I will then slide this through nice and easy. And I can bring this a little closer. Okay. That's looking really good. So now you can see I've got my connectors, my cables for the battery, cables for the science bay, cables for the flight control. And I'm just kind of keep sliding this together until I've got about, 4 or 5 inches to work with here so I can get my hands in and make these connections. This is a really tricky part. Sometimes I have to take my watch off, take my rings off, take whatever you need to do off, get some light in there.
Right.
And the same way that I took them apart, I normally put them back together. So I start with the starboard side top and work my way across. So we want to make sure we get all these connected. And it leaves me some space when I do it that way to get everything going here.
Sure.
So here's my 3-pin to a 3-pin. Kind of dangly guy on that side there. And the next one is this 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 10 pin white connector. That goes to the 10 pin. Actually, Jordy, I don't think I've ever done this from this side.
Yeah,
Can I switch with you? Yeah, you're fine. Do we need some light in there?
It might not hurt.
Yeah, I'm right-handed, but I need to get my left hand in there so I could use my good eye.
There we go.
And my left fiddly connectors. Make sure they're lined up. We don't want to bend any pins. There we go. That clicked. Did you hear that click?
Yeah.
Now my next one is a smaller black connector. There's two. One's the big guy, this one here, and this is the small guy. And you can see on the edges there are places where I typically position my finger and thumb, my index finger and my thumb, to be able to push in for the click.
Yep.
So I hold it in place so we're not bending any pins, and then I move my fingers to the outside and push in, and that's, I can tug on it without pressing the button, and it's seated perfectly.
Great.
And I'll take my large, nope, next one I'll do this one, this small white one. Here it goes on the bottom.
Okay.
And then I'll take this small white one here to this 4-pin to 4-pin. And then the big black connector. Nice, it's all perfectly seated. I can tug on it, it's not coming out. So that is good.
Cool.
So you can imagine here, as we close this thing up, we also want to be really careful that we're not pinching any cables or causing any undue stress as I slide this thing forward.
Yep.
Nothing's coming over the sides here, nothing's coming over the top. Nothing came out disconnected. And I just want to make sure this black line is lined up with my the center,
Pick point. Yeah.
the pick point. And then also here in the tail, there's a little groove that we want to be centered with that black line.
Great.
So now I kind of just put a little bit of pressure to seal this up to the point where now the threads from our tie rod are pushing up against here.
Okay.
And I will use my large T-handle Allen key. I kind of have to pick up just a little bit so I can see that Allen key head. And where is it? There we are, we're in. And I sort of pick this thing up to keep it nicely aligned. And turn.
You can feel the threads bite.
Yep. And you can actually see here it's starting to close. Normally it closes the aft tray first.
Sure.
But I do like to keep a couple things here. Now there's a really high probability that if there's differential pressure going on these O-rings, that you can wind up putting a nick in them or crimping them down, or sometimes they kind of try to burp out and then you keep closing. If you don't visually inspect it as it's closing, you can run into some troubles.
Okay.
So everything looks pretty good right now.
Yep.
But I'm going to keep an eye on it. I'm just going to give it a couple more turns.
Yep.
Keep this one, the bottom is tighter than the top, so I can just pick that up just a little bit.
Yeah.
And keep my hand and thumb there as I twist this. How are those other ones coming together? They look nice?
Yeah, they're looking good.
Okay, this is just about to go through its final twist there, but I'm going to take out my big T-handled Allen key, and now I'm going to hook up my torque wrench to make sure that I've got the exact amount of torque that we want in here. A couple more turns. And it's just going to go here, just a second. Here we go. Listen to this. That's the right amount of torque. Now I typically will, again, pick up on this fin, holding it here by the metal, just to make sure if there's any burps or anything else that need to be, okay, just an inch. And I got another kind of a quarter turn, but that's perfect, yep. Okay, so that is sealed up, but we have to pull a vacuum. Before we pull a vacuum, we're gonna hook up our electrical connector. Maybe we wanna pause the video and start a new one. Okay, cool. All right, well, before I pull that vacuum, I actually realized maybe I should reattach all my wing rails here. Just tighten that down. And then we're gonna tighten down our bracket that holds the Vemco receiver on. Oh, that's not the right size. 1/8.
No torque setting here, just nice and snug.
Just snugging it up, yep. Snugger. This is like Hank torque setting here. Snug it up. All right, that's cool. Got that nice. Put this other wing rail on here. It's tight. And that's tight. Okay. Now, tricky part, our air plug. So before I put these on, I always like to inspect that the O-ring is seated at the base of the threads. This is an important O-ring here. And we also want to make sure it's nice and clean. Should be well lubed because I lubed it up before I
took it out of there.
Took it out of there.
Yep.
Okay, so then we have a vacuum pump. I will ship a vacuum pump down with the tool case.
Yep.
And this is this glass rod and a vacuum pressure gauge. So the way that we work this is we take our T-handle Allen tool, we stick it through the glass tube, we put our air plug on it, and then kind of slide it up and over the O-ring on the end of the air. So now it can suck a vacuum from the inside of the glider, and when it's at the right vacuum, I can push this in and close it. Okay. So I'll demonstrate that. It's a little bit funky. I have a couple techniques that I use. Like I push this onto that air hole. Sometimes I'll brace my index finger against the large black connector there, so I can keep things nice and stable. And then I use my left hand to get ready to, let's see.
Find the threads.
Yeah, find the thread. So that's about how I do it, and then I can do that. Great. So, turn on my vacuum pump. Find my threads. There we go. Okay, you can see the pressure is increasing here. We're at 5. Trying to find the flat surface to get a nice, okay, we're at 8 now. I'm going to start, and you can see the pressure's going up quite a bit. That's because it's just sucking up against nothing, yeah. Okay. Turn that off. Now I didn't put a final torque on this little plastic because the metal winds up stripping out all the threads there.
Sure.
So I'll use my 1/2 inch here.
I see.
And giving that final sort of snug. Now, before I do anything else, we need this vacuum to be about 6 inches of mercury. And it's impossible to get it there from the vacuum pump. So we're gonna boot up the glider, and then we're gonna have its pressure sensor tell us what the pressure is, and we're gonna back this nut off to let a little bit of air in to get it right at 6, and then kind of lock it down.
Great.
Okay, we can take a break here, and then we'll set up the computer so we can talk to it. Yeah.
Sounds good. You're on.
All right. So now we've got what's called our dock server laptop that's running Ubuntu Linux something or other. And we have our FreeWave radio modem. The FreeWave radio modem is going to communicate with the glider.
Great.
Right now it's all three red lights. So what I want to do first is the start glider terminal is located right in the middle of the screen. I'm going to double click on that to start up the application so that we can start talking to the glider. Okay, and then I'm going to go over here to the docks, and I'm going to click that, and all the gliders I've ever connected to this dock server show up. Right now, we're going to want to talk to unit 191, but it is red because I have not turned on the glider yet.
Oh, right.
So the next step is to locate a green plug.
There we go.
Green plug. We're going to pull out our red plug, insert the green plug. Okay, now this thing's going to turn on. And we're going to see
Green lights.
green and some other lights blinking.
Great.
Now we're also going to start seeing some stuff. Scroll across the screen. Gobbledygook messages, unless you're used to talking to gliders. But it says you have 120 seconds to type a Control-C to terminate the sequence. So I'm going to type a Control-C. Now I've got my glider DOS prompt right here. So now I can enter in commands. The first command I'm going to enter is going to say call back 30. Tell the iridium to shut off. I'm going to hang up the iridium.
Okay.
And I'm going to type lab underscore mode on because we are on the bench. So there's some things. Pitch motor started because out of dead band. We don't like that, but we'll see. Now I'm going to type ballast, B-A-L-L-A-S-T, enter. And you can hear that the air bladder stopped inflating. And up in the front, it's moving the pitch motor back to its center position. And then all the way up in the nose cone here, you can even feel it vibrating. That's the buoyancy engine. It's basically recentering the buoyancy engine at its neutral position.
Okay.
You would never do this when the glider's in the water,
Okay.
only on the bench.
Right.
Okay, so now we see sensor M underscore ballast pumped 0.29 cc. The motors have stopped. And it's going to keep scrolling that M ballast pump number, but it's at 0. And we're happy with that it's at 0. So we're going to type report space clear all. And that's going to tell that sensor to stop reporting to the screen. And then I'm going to type report ++ M underscore vacuum. Oop, I spelled it wrong.
Are the spaces in there necessary?
Yes. ++ M underscore VACU not UMM.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So it got the command, and now it's going to start reporting the vacuum pressure inside the glider to the screen. So we're at 8.6.
Right.
We want it to be at 6.
Okay.
So what I typically do is I back this off. Till I hear a little bit of air seeping in. And there we go. And now I can look at my screen. 8.3. And I can basically back it off a little bit more with my fingers.
Yep. 8.1. 7.9.
7.62. 7.2. 6.7, we'll kind of close it down here, a little bit slower, going too fast. 6.4, 6.3, okay. 6.25, 6.14, and I'm going to close her down here. And the final vacuum is 6.11. That is going to be close enough because that'll change with temperature. But we want it to be within, I don't know, 6.1, 5.9, somewhere in there. So I'm going to close that down. I'm going to type report clear all. And somewhere I'd like to take a note of what my final vacuum seal pressure is, 6.1, because when this thing will get transported to its eventual deployment location, one of the first things we'll do on deck is check its vacuum pressure. And if it's significantly different, we know we have some sort of leak and we gotta abort.
Check it out.
Yeah, we gotta check it out.
Great.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave this thing on for now.
Yep.
And I'm gonna put the tail cowling back on, and I kind of spread it up with my hands. And I'm gonna make sure that the air bladder is folded up. There's nothing that's gonna get pinched as I put this thing back on here. Slide it on nice. For whatever reason, this one is a little bit tight back here. And so you kind of have to finagle it on to make sure that it's happy. There we go. And then there's a groove between the cowling and the actual hull. And it's got to be
Lined up just right.
just right so it fits right over that cowling there.
Okay.
So it's nice and in there. And then we'll put our 2 screws that hold this tail cowling on. Where's my tool? Sorry. And get that one started. And then get this one started before I cinch them down because they don't like to play together very well. Okay. Make sure the cowling's where it needs to be. And that's where it needs to be. Tighten that down. Put my thruster back on. Make sure I haven't lost my nut. There. Here's my small Allen tool. There.
Great.
Okay, now I'll go back to my computer screen, and I've got all these commands in the instructions. We don't need to record them as I type them, but there's some tests that we do. Wiggle on, wiggle off, roll a glider outside, run a status.mi mission, make sure it's got GPS and Iridium and so on and so forth.
Right.
And if all that checks out, we'll be ready to deploy. I think the only other thing that maybe I should show you while I've got the camera rolling, right, Jordy?
Yep.
Is the installation of the wings.
Right.
Because they have to be deployed with the wings. The wings have a little groove in them up here in the front. They line up with the front of the wing rail as you slide them on and kind of bring them back, and then they clip into place, and then they have a Phillips head screw right here. Yep, and that if you wanted to undo it, you can kind of push that. Ooh, that needs a little bit of oil.
Oh. There we go. There's the click.
And then we screw this down. That's
Awesome.
ready for deployment. One other thing, and I think I've talked to, we have to take this off,
Oh, sure.
and we have to take underneath here, maybe from your side, Jordy.
Sure.
This is the oxygen probe here, and we need to take the cover of the oxygen probe off before deployment.
Okay. CTD is all good.
CTD is all good.
Okay.
And the fluorometer is all good. RX Live is all good. Before deployment, we pull, there's another a pin here. We have to press the blue button.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And now this glider can slide off of the cart if need be, if you're deploying it from the cart, or if we're going to deploy it from the crane, you could pick it up, boom over, put it in the water. Yeah.
Great.
All right, I think that should cover it for now. Two wings, obviously.
Who's that?
Yeah,
Second wing?
put that one on too. And screw that one down.
Good to go.
Good to go, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks.